The people who can break your heart the fastest are usually the ones who share your last name. That was the thought that crossed my mind at exactly 7:12 on Father's Day morning, the moment my phone vibrated against the kitchen counter. The smell of fresh pancakes filled our little house in Cedar Ridge, Ohio, while bacon sizzled in the cast-iron skillet. Sunlight poured through the windows, painting warm golden stripes across the hardwood floor. My 8-year-old daughter, Lily, stood on a chair carefully arranging strawberries into the shape of a heart on my breakfast plate, her tiny tongue peeking out in concentration. Across from her, my 6-year-old son, Noah, was hiding something colorful behind his back, whispering loudly enough that everyone could hear. "Don't let Dad see it yet." Claire laughed as she poured coffee into my favorite navy blue mug, the one with "World's Okayest Dad" printed across the side because, as she always said, perfect fathers only existed in movies. It should have been one of those mornings you wish could last forever. Instead, one text message changed everything. I glanced at the screen without thinking, expecting another Father's Day greeting from an old friend or one of my coworkers. Instead, I saw my younger brother Ryan's name. The preview alone made my stomach tighten before I even opened it. I unlocked the phone, and the words stared back at me with a coldness that seemed impossible for black letters on a white screen. "Don't bring your family today. We're sick of you. It'll be better for everyone if you just stay home." I read it once, then twice, then a third time because my brain refused to believe Ryan had actually typed those words. For a second, I honestly wondered if someone had stolen his phone. But there was no mistake. It sounded exactly like him. Short, sharp, final. I didn't realize I'd stopped breathing until Claire touched my shoulder. "Everything okay?" she asked with that gentle smile she somehow never seemed to lose. I forced one back. "Yeah, just a work thing." It was the kind of lie married people recognized immediately, but sometimes accepted because they loved you enough to wait until you were ready. Claire looked at me for another second before nodding. "Well, no work today. Today's yours." Lily suddenly ran over holding a folded card covered in glitter. "Close your eyes, Daddy," she shouted. I obeyed. Tiny hands pressed the card into mine. "Now open." Inside was a drawing of the four of us standing beneath a huge oak tree. Our dog, Murphy, looked twice his real size, and everyone had impossibly large smiles. Above us, she had written, in uneven blue marker, "Happy Father's Day to the best daddy in the whole world." I swallowed hard before looking up. Noah finally revealed what he'd been hiding behind his back, a birdhouse we'd started building together 2 weekends earlier. The paint was uneven. One side leaned just a little. The roof didn't quite fit. It was perfect. "I finished it after you went to bed," he said proudly. "So birds can have a family house too." I wrapped both kids in the biggest hug I could manage without letting my phone slip from my hand. Ryan's message still glowed on the screen against my palm, like it wanted to remind me that not every family saw me the way these 3 did. I quietly locked the phone and slid it face down onto the counter before anyone else could notice. Across town, my parents were probably setting out folding chairs in the backyard like they did every Father's Day. Ryan was probably laughing with his wife while pretending nothing had happened. Maybe he'd already convinced himself he was right. Maybe everyone agreed with him. Maybe I had been fooling myself for years into believing I still belonged there. Claire handed me my coffee and kissed my cheek. "Your mom text you the address for lunch?" she asked casually. I stared into the dark coffee for a second longer than I should have. "Not yet," I answered softly, already knowing that wasn't the truth. Claire did not ask another question, and that was one of the countless reasons I loved her. She had learned years ago that whenever I became unusually quiet, pushing for answers only made me retreat further into myself. Instead, she simply smiled and began packing the picnic basket we had planned to take after lunch. The kids raced upstairs to get dressed, they're excited. Footsteps echoing through the hallway while I remained standing in the kitchen, staring at my reflection in the dark screen of my phone. I should have deleted Ryan's message. I should have pretended it never existed. Instead, I opened it again, almost hoping I had somehow misunderstood it the first 3 times. The words had not changed. They somehow looked even colder now. I scrolled upward, searching for the conversation that might explain it, but there was nothing before that single message. No argument, no disagreement, no warning, just a wall slammed shut without explanation. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I typed, "Did I do something wrong?" Then I erased it. I typed, "If this is about last Thanksgiving, we should talk." I erased that too. Finally, I locked the screen without sending anything. Maybe silence was easier for everyone. It always had been. 20 years earlier, silence had become my role in the Carter family. Ryan was 7 when he broke a baseball through our neighbor's living room window. Dad assumed I had been supervising him and grounded me for 2 weeks. I never argued because Ryan cried so hard that Mom said he had already learned his lesson. When Ryan wrecked Dad's pickup truck at 17, everyone talked about how frightened he must have been. I was the one who spent every Saturday that summer helping Dad repair the damage because Ryan had football practice. "Is your special day? So I am going to be extra good." "That sounds dangerous," I teased. He giggled so hard, he almost tipped backward. Lily appeared at the bottom of the stairs wearing a yellow summer dress, with tiny white daisies stitched across the sleeves. She spun in a circle. "Do I look nice enough for Grandma?" she asked. The question hit me harder than Ryan's text had. I forced another smile. "You always look wonderful." She beamed with satisfaction before running outside to help Claire wash Murphy, who had somehow found a muddy puddle before 9 o'clock in the morning. I watched them through the kitchen window. Claire sprayed the garden hose while the kids laughed every time Murphy shook water all over them. It looked like one of those moments families framed and hung on living room walls. My phone buzzed again. My heart immediately sank, expecting another message from Ryan. Instead, it was my mother. "Happy Father's Day, sweetheart. Looking forward to seeing everyone at 1 o'clock. Love you." I stared at the message in disbelief. She had no idea. Or maybe she did. Maybe she had sent it automatically without knowing what Ryan had already decided. My eyes shifted between her cheerful text and my brother's rejection. 2 completely different realities existed on the same screen. For several long seconds, I wondered which one I was supposed to believe. Then Claire walked back inside carrying the picnic basket. "I was thinking," she said cheerfully, "instead of staying there all afternoon, maybe we leave early and take the kids to Riverside Park afterward. It is supposed to be beautiful today." I looked at her, then at my children chasing Murphy across the backyard, and an unexpected thought quietly settled into my mind. Maybe Riverside Park did not have to be afterward. Maybe it could simply be the whole day. The decision settled inside me with a surprising sense of peace, almost as if I had already known the answer before I admitted it to myself. "How about we skip lunch at my parents' place?" I asked carefully. Claire paused while zipping the picnic basket. She did not look shocked. She simply studied my face the way someone reads a familiar book, noticing the pages that had quietly changed. "Are you sure?" she asked. "I think so." She walked over, rested her hand on my arm, and smiled. "Then that is what we will do." There was no interrogation, no pressure, no disappointment, just support. It reminded me how different love felt when it came without conditions. Lily and Noah were less concerned about changing plans than they were about whether Riverside Park still had the duck pond. When I assured them it did, they celebrated as though I had just announced a trip to Disney World. Their excitement made the heaviness in my chest ease, if only a little. While Claire packed sandwiches, fresh fruit, and homemade cookies into the cooler, I carried folding chairs into the garage. My hands moved automatically, but my mind wandered backward through years I had spent convincing myself that family loyalty meant accepting whatever was handed to me. I remembered the summer after Dad retired. Ryan had called me in a panic because he was behind on his mortgage. Without telling Claire, I loaned him nearly $6,000 from the savings we had been putting aside for a family vacation. He promised he would pay me back within 3 months. That had been almost 5 years ago. Every time I mentioned it, he laughed awkwardly and changed the subject. Eventually, I stopped asking because I hated making gatherings uncomfortable. Last Christmas, Ryan gave Dad an expensive fishing reel and Mom a new tablet. Everyone praised his generosity for nearly an hour. Claire quietly handed them a framed family photograph we had spent weeks restoring from faded prints. Mom cried when she opened it. She hugged Claire and thanked her for preserving so many memories. Then Ryan joked that photographs were nice because they did not cost much. Everyone laughed. Even I forced a smile. Nobody knew Claire and I had spent dozens of evenings carefully repairing every damaged image on her laptop. Nobody knew she had skipped buying herself a winter coat so we could afford the custom frame. We never corrected anyone because we believed kindness did not need applause. Looking back, I wondered how many small moments like that had quietly taught Ryan that my efforts would always be overlooked. Maybe people eventually believe the story they are told often enough. Maybe I had helped write mine by staying silent every time it happened. Murphy barked excitedly as Noah tossed a tennis ball across the yard. Their laughter drifted through the open garage door, bringing me back to the present. Claire appeared carrying the cooler. Need help? I shook my head. I have got it. She hesitated before asking, does this have something to do with Ryan? I looked at her for a long moment. Keeping the truth hidden suddenly felt heavier than speaking it. Without saying a word, I unlocked my phone and handed it to her. She read the message once. Then again. The warmth disappeared from her expression, replaced by quiet disbelief. Ethan, she whispered. He actually sent this. I nodded. She looked up at me with tears beginning to gather in her eyes. Not because she was hurt for herself, but because she finally understood something I had spent years minimizing. Why did you tell me it was work? She asked softly. I gave a tired smile. Because I did not want Father's Day to start with everyone feeling bad. Claire reached for my hand and squeezed it tightly. You know what I am sick of, she said. Watching people treat the kindest man I know like he has to earn a place in his own family. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed again. Then it buzzed a second time. And then a third. The screen lit up with Ryan's name, followed immediately by my father's number, and then my Aunt Melissa. None of them left a message. They simply kept calling, one after another, as though something had suddenly changed only minutes after deciding I was no longer welcome. The calls kept coming so quickly that my phone barely stopped vibrating before another name appeared across the screen. Ryan. Dad. Aunt Melissa. Uncle Greg. Even my cousin Ben, who usually forgot my birthday every year, was suddenly trying to reach me. Claire looked at the display, then back at me. Something happened, she said quietly. I nodded, but I did not answer. For the first time in years, I did not feel responsible for solving whatever family crisis had appeared. I pressed the side button and silenced the phone. Let us go, I said. The kids are waiting. 20 minutes later, we were driving north toward Riverside Park with the windows down and the warm June breeze filling the SUV. Noah was singing along to an old country song he barely knew the words to while Lily counted every American flag she spotted along the road because it had become her favorite road trip game. Claire reached across the center console and gently squeezed my hand. Neither of us mentioned the phone sitting face down in the cup holder. I wanted one peaceful hour before reality caught up with us. Riverside Park was already alive with families celebrating the holiday. Fathers pushed toddlers on swings while grandparents unfolded lawn chairs beneath enormous maple trees. The smell of grilled hamburgers drifted through the air, mixing with fresh-cut grass and the sweetness of blooming flowers. Children chased bubbles across open fields, and somewhere near the lake a local band was playing familiar classic rock songs. It was impossible not to smile. We found a quiet spot beneath a large oak tree overlooking the duck pond. Noah immediately grabbed a bag of birdseed from the picnic basket and sprinted toward the water with Lily close behind. Claire spread out the blanket while I unfolded the chairs. For the first time all morning, my shoulders relaxed. You look different, Claire said. Better? I asked. Lighter, she answered. Like you finally stopped carrying something that was never yours. I looked toward the pond where the kids were laughing as ducks waddled after them in a noisy little parade. Maybe she was right. Maybe I had spent years carrying expectations that no one else was willing to carry for me. Just as I sat down, my phone buzzed again. This time it was not a call. It was a group text. My Aunt Melissa had accidentally replied to everyone in the family chat instead of sending a private message. "Ethan, I am so sorry you had to read that. Ryan never meant for the whole family to see it." Before I could fully process those words, another message appeared from Ryan. "Aunt Melissa, delete this now." Then another. Mom wrote, "Ryan, what are you talking about? What message?" My stomach tightened. Ryan's next response arrived almost instantly. "I sent Ethan something privately. It was not supposed to end up here." A long pause followed. Then my father replied with only 3 words. "You said what?" One by one, more relatives joined the conversation. Cousin Emily wrote that she could not believe anyone would send something so cruel. Uncle Greg asked whether Ryan had lost his mind. My Aunt Denise reminded everyone that I had never missed a single Father's Day gathering in nearly 15 years. Every new notification revealed another family member who had now seen the message Ryan never intended anyone else to read. I stared at the screen in complete silence. Claire leaned closer. "He accidentally posted it to the entire family." I nodded slowly. The irony was almost unbelievable. Ryan had spent years protecting his image as the successful, charming younger brother who could do no wrong. In less than 60 seconds, that image had cracked all by itself. My phone immediately began ringing again. This time it was my father, then my mother, then Ryan, then my father again. I looked out across the pond where Lily had convinced Noah to kneel beside the water so they could watch a mother duck lead her ducklings across the shimmering surface. They were laughing so hard they did not notice anything else in the world. I pressed the power button, turned my phone completely off, slipped it into my pocket, and quietly whispered to myself, "They can wait. Today belongs to my children." For the next 2 hours, I forgot my phone even existed. Noah insisted we build the world's greatest sandcastle in the small play area near the pond, despite the fact that it was made from ordinary playground sand and leaned dangerously to one side before we finished. Lily collected smooth stones along the water's edge and declared each one lucky because, according to her, every Father's Day deserved lucky rocks. Claire laughed so hard watching us that she nearly dropped the lemonade she had packed that morning. It was simple. It was peaceful. It was everything I had hoped the day could become. We ate turkey sandwiches beneath the shade of the giant oak while Murphy waited patiently for someone to accidentally drop a piece of cheese. Noah asked me what my favorite Father's Day gift had ever been. I looked at my children, then at Claire, and answered honestly. This afternoon. He smiled proudly as though he had personally arranged the weather. After lunch, Lily tugged on my sleeve. "Can we take a family picture?" she asked. "Grandma always says pictures help people remember the happy days." Claire set her phone on a nearby picnic table and used the timer. We squeezed together with the kids between us and Murphy sitting proudly in front. Just before the camera clicked, Noah shouted, "Everybody be silly." The picture captured all 4 of us laughing instead of posing. It instantly became my favorite family photograph. Around 3 o'clock, we packed everything back into the SUV. As I reached into my pocket for the keys, my fingers brushed against my phone. I had almost forgotten it was still turned off. For a moment, I considered leaving it that way until tomorrow. But curiosity finally won. I pressed the power button. The screen lit up, and within seconds the notifications began arriving faster than I could read them. 32 missed calls, 47 text messages, 12 voicemails, 3 missed video calls. My inbox looked as though an entire office had tried to reach me during an emergency. Claire slowly exhaled. That cannot be good. I opened the oldest voicemail first. It was my father. His voice sounded older than I remembered. "Ethan, please call me as soon as you hear this. We need to talk." I did not know about the message. "Please, son." The second message was from my mother. She was crying. "Sweetheart, I am so sorry. I had no idea Ryan sent that. Please answer your phone. We all want to explain." The third was Ryan. His usual confidence had disappeared. "Ethan, this got blown way out of proportion. Just call me so we can clear this up." I almost laughed at that. Blown out of proportion. As though the problem had been people reading his words instead of the words themselves. I opened the family group chat again. Hundreds of new messages had appeared. My Aunt Denise had written that kindness should never be mistaken for weakness. Uncle Greg admitted that I had always been the one holding family gatherings together while everyone else took it for granted. Cousin Emily posted an old photograph from nearly 10 years earlier showing me grilling hamburgers while Ryan relaxed in a lawn chair talking with friends. "Funny," she wrote. "Ethan always did the work while Ryan took the credit." One memory unlocked another. Suddenly relatives began sharing stories I had completely forgotten. Aunt Melissa reminded everyone that I had driven 6 hours through a snowstorm to help my grandparents after their furnace failed. My cousin Ben admitted I had quietly paid for his community college textbooks years earlier when his family could not afford them. Even my father's oldest friend commented that whenever someone in the Carter family needed help, everyone instinctively called me first. Reading those messages felt strangely unreal. For years I had convinced myself nobody noticed. Maybe they had noticed all along. Maybe they had simply never spoken up until now. Then a final message appeared from my father, sent only minutes earlier. I asked Ryan to leave the house. Father's Day lunch is over. It was never worth losing my oldest son. I stared at those words for a long time before locking the phone again. Claire slipped her hand into mine. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly. I looked back toward the pond where Lily and Noah were chasing each other across the grass, completely unaware that anything extraordinary had happened that day. I smiled, not because everything had been fixed, but because for the first time in years I realized something important. I had not lost my family today. I had finally discovered which people were truly willing to fight to keep me in it. I did not call anyone that evening. Not because I wanted revenge, and not because I enjoyed watching anyone worry. I simply needed time to hear my own thoughts without someone else telling me how I should feel. After we tucked Lily and Noah into bed, Claire and I sat together on the back porch while the last streaks of orange disappeared beyond the trees. The neighborhood had settled into its usual quiet rhythm. Somewhere in the distance, a lawn sprinkler clicked steadily across fresh summer grass, and fireflies drifted through the warm evening air. Claire rested her head against my shoulder. "You have been carrying them for a long time, have you not?" she asked. I nodded slowly. Longer than I realized. We sat in comfortable silence until my phone buzzed again. This time it was not Ryan. It was my father. A single text. "Please. Just 10 minutes. I owe you the truth." I stared at the message for nearly a minute before replying. "Tomorrow morning. My house. 9 o'clock. No one else." His response came almost immediately. "Thank you, son." The next morning arrived with clear blue skies and the smell of fresh coffee filling the kitchen. At exactly 9 o'clock, a familiar pickup truck rolled slowly into the driveway. My father stepped out looking older than he had only 2 days earlier. His shoulders seemed lower, and the confident stride I remembered from childhood had been replaced by careful, hesitant steps. When I opened the front door, neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally he said, "I almost turned around 3 times on the drive over because I was ashamed to face you." I stepped aside. "Come in." Claire greeted him politely before taking the children outside to the backyard so we could talk privately. Dad sat at the kitchen table, turning his baseball cap over and over in his hands. It was something he only did when he was nervous. "Your mother showed me Ryan's message after everyone started arguing yesterday," he began quietly. "I thought it had to be fake. I asked him if he really wrote it." He stopped and sighed deeply. He said yes. I remained silent. For once, I wanted him to finish without rescuing him from the uncomfortable parts. "Then something happened that I should have done years ago," he continued. I asked him why. Dad rubbed his forehead before looking directly at me. Do you know what he said? I slowly shook my head. He said everyone always worried about disappointing you because you never complained. He said you would forgive anything, so it was easier to ask you to give something up than to argue with anyone else. The words settled over the room with painful clarity. They were not entirely wrong. I had become the easiest person to disappoint because everyone assumed I would quietly accept it. Dad's eyes filled with regret. That is when I realized your mother and I helped create that thinking. His voice cracked slightly. Every time we expected you to be the bigger person. Every time we praised you for understanding. Every time we let something slide because you never made a scene. We taught your brother that your feelings mattered less. Hearing my father admit that felt stranger than hearing him apologize. It was the first time I could remember him taking responsibility without immediately explaining it away. I failed you, he said simply. Not yesterday. For years. I looked down at my coffee cup, searching for the anger I thought I should feel. Instead, I mostly felt tired. I spent a long time wondering what I kept doing wrong, I admitted. Yesterday was the first day I realized maybe I was asking the wrong question. Dad frowned. What do you mean? I met his eyes. Instead of asking why my family did not appreciate me, I should have been asking why I kept believing I had to earn love that should have been freely given. Neither of us spoke after that. The silence no longer felt awkward. It felt honest. After a few moments, Dad quietly nodded. Ryan wants to come apologize. I leaned back in my chair and took a slow breath before answering. Maybe someday. But not because everyone expects me to make things comfortable again. This time, if there is going to be healing, it has to begin with the truth. I did not hear from Ryan for 3 days. There were no calls, no messages, and no attempts to appear unexpectedly at my door. Part of me wondered whether he had finally decided that pretending I no longer existed was easier than admitting what had happened. Life, however, continued moving forward in the quiet, ordinary ways that mattered most. Every morning I packed Noah's lunch while Claire braided Lily's hair before school. Every evening we ate dinner together around the same oak table where we had celebrated birthdays, homework victories, and countless ordinary Tuesdays that somehow became my favorite memories. I found myself paying more attention to those moments than ever before. They reminded me that the strongest families were often built in the smallest routines. Late Wednesday afternoon, as I was trimming the hedges in the front yard, a dark blue sedan slowly pulled into the driveway. I recognized Ryan's car immediately. He sat behind the steering wheel for nearly a full minute without getting out. Finally, the driver's door opened, and my younger brother stepped onto the driveway, looking nothing like the confident man who usually walked into every room believing everyone was happy to see him. His shoulders were slumped, his eyes were tired, and for the first time in my life, he looked uncertain. I set the hedge trimmers on the ground and waited. He stopped several feet away, leaving enough distance that I could have asked him to leave if I wanted. Instead, he quietly said, Dad told me I had one chance to apologize, and only if you wanted to hear it. I looked at him for a long moment before answering. I will listen. That does not mean everything goes back to normal. He nodded immediately. I understand. We sat on the front porch where Claire had left 2 glasses of iced tea before taking the children to a nearby playground. She understood this conversation belonged to us alone. Ryan stared at the untouched glass in front of him. I have practiced this speech 100 times, he admitted with a nervous laugh that disappeared almost instantly. None of them sounded honest enough. He took a slow breath. I sent that message because I was frustrated, but that is not an excuse. The truth is, I have been jealous of you for years. I blinked in surprise. Jealous was the last word I expected to hear. Ryan gave a small, embarrassed smile. I know that sounds ridiculous. Everyone always thought I was the successful one. Better job, bigger house, newer truck. But every time something went wrong in the family, who did everyone trust? You. Every time someone needed help, who showed up? You. Mom always said you were dependable. Dad always said you had character. The kids adore you. Claire believes in you. I kept thinking if people stopped leaning on you, maybe they would notice me more. I sat quietly, letting him continue. Instead of becoming a better brother, he said, his voice growing softer, I convinced myself that pushing you away would somehow make me feel bigger. It did not. It just showed everyone exactly who I had become. He finally looked up at me, and I could see genuine regret replacing the pride he usually carried. I cannot take back those words. I cannot pretend they were an accident. They were exactly what I was thinking, and that is what scares me the most. I appreciated that he did not blame stress, misunderstanding, or bad timing. He owned what he had done. That mattered. But it did not erase years of quiet hurt overnight. Ryan, I said carefully, I forgive you because I do not want to carry bitterness for the rest of my life. But forgiveness is not the same thing as pretending nothing happened. He nodded before I even finished speaking. I know, I continued. If we are ever going to have a real relationship again, it cannot be built on me staying silent every time something hurts. And it cannot depend on me always being the one who gives in. Ryan wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and whispered, I do not expect you to trust me today. I offered a small, genuine smile. That is probably the first wise thing you have said to me in years. For the first time since he arrived, Ryan laughed. It was quiet, awkward, and mixed with tears, but it was real. And somehow, for the first time in a very long while, it felt like we were finally speaking to each other as brothers instead of strangers pretending to be family. Over the next several weeks, nobody expected miracles, and that turned out to be the healthiest beginning any of us could have asked for. Ryan did not suddenly become the perfect brother, and I did not suddenly forget years of disappointment. Instead, something much smaller happened. He started showing up. When Mom needed help cleaning out the attic, he volunteered before anyone asked. When Dad's riding mower broke down, he spent his Saturday fixing it instead of assuming someone else would handle it. The changes were quiet enough that most people might not have noticed, but I did. Real change rarely arrived with dramatic speeches. It revealed itself through ordinary choices repeated over time. One Saturday afternoon, nearly a month after Father's Day, my parents invited everyone over for a backyard barbecue. This time, the invitation came directly from both of them, and at the bottom of the message my mother had written one extra sentence. We hope every member of this family feels welcome. I read those words twice before showing Claire. She smiled gently. What do you think? She asked. I looked toward Lily and Noah, who were building another crooked birdhouse in the garage, and realized I no longer felt anxious about seeing my family. I think we can go, I answered. But we leave whenever we choose. Claire nodded. That sounds fair. When we arrived, something felt different before anyone even spoke. My father met us at the driveway instead of waiting on the back patio. He hugged each of the children first, then looked at me with quiet gratitude. I am glad you came, he said. So am I replied honestly. My mother greeted Claire with tears in her eyes and apologized once more for not recognizing sooner how much pressure I had quietly carried through the years. Claire hugged her warmly, but gently reminded her that apologies mattered most when they were followed by different choices. My mother smiled through her tears. I am learning that now. Ryan walked over carrying a tray of hamburgers for the grill. He stopped a few feet away, giving me space to decide how comfortable I felt. Need a hand with anything? He asked. I looked around the backyard and noticed something unusual. He was already helping. The folding tables had been set up. Drinks were arranged in coolers. Lawn games were ready for the children. Nobody was waiting for me to organize everything the way they always had before. Looks like you already have it covered, I said with a small smile. He shrugged. I figured it was my turn. Those 5 simple words meant more to me than the expensive gifts or polished speeches that had filled previous family gatherings. Throughout the afternoon, nobody asked me to smooth over awkward moments or pretend everything had instantly healed. We simply spent time together. Dad grilled burgers while Ryan served plates. Mom chased the grandchildren through the yard with bubbles floating behind them. Claire sat beside my Aunt Melissa, laughing over old family stories that somehow sounded lighter than they had in years. At one point, Noah ran across the yard carrying the birdhouse he and Lily had finally finished painting. "Grandpa," he shouted excitedly, "look what Dad taught us to build." My father examined it carefully as though it belonged in a museum instead of a backyard. Then he looked at me. "You always were good at building things that lasted," he said quietly. I knew he was not talking about the birdhouse. Later that afternoon, while everyone else watched the children search for painted rocks hidden around the yard, Ryan stepped beside me near the old oak tree. "You know," he said, "I spent years thinking respect came from being the loudest person in the room." He glanced toward the family gathered together across the lawn. "Turns out it comes from being the person people can count on." I smiled faintly. That lesson took both of us longer than it should have. Ryan nodded. "At least we finally learned it." As I watched Lily slip her small hand into Claire's while Noah proudly carried the birdhouse toward the garden, I realized something that had quietly changed inside me. I was no longer attending family gatherings because I felt obligated to prove my worth. I was there because, for the first time in a very long while, everyone seemed to understand that love was never supposed to be something one person earned for everyone else. Nearly a year passed before Father's Day came around again. By then, life had settled into something that felt less like perfection and more like peace, and I had learned that peace was far more valuable. Our little house was still filled with the same sounds every morning. Claire humming while making coffee. Noah searching everywhere for shoes that somehow always ended up under the couch. Lily carefully packing another handmade card because she believed store-bought gifts could never compete with something created by someone who loved you. Murphy was older now and slower to chase squirrels, but he still greeted every family member at the front door as though they had been gone for months instead of minutes. Some things deserve to stay exactly the same. That Father's Day morning, my phone buzzed just after breakfast. For a brief second, I felt the old knot of anxiety return before I even looked at the screen. Then I smiled. It was Ryan. "Happy Father's Day, big brother. Thank you for teaching me what being a father and a brother is supposed to look like. We would love to see all of you today, but if you already have plans with Claire and the kids, enjoy every minute. Family should never feel like an obligation again." I read the message twice before locking my phone. There was no pressure, no guilt, no expectation, just an invitation. Claire noticed the smile on my face. "Good news?" she asked. I handed her the phone. She read the message and quietly nodded. That sounds like the Ryan I hoped existed somewhere underneath everything else. We decided to stop by my parents' house for an hour before spending the afternoon together at Riverside Park, returning to the place that had quietly changed the course of our family the year before. When we arrived, nobody was rushing around pretending everything had to be perfect. Dad was burning the first batch of hamburgers because he had become distracted helping Noah throw a baseball. Mom and Lily were planting flowers near the porch. Ryan was assembling a picnic table with instructions spread out upside down while everyone teased him about it. The laughter sounded natural instead of forced. Before we left, Dad asked if everyone could gather for one photograph. We stood together beneath the old oak tree where so many family pictures had been taken over the years. Just before the camera flashed, he cleared his throat. "1 minute," he said. He turned toward me. "I spent too many years thanking the wrong people for holding this family together. Today I want to thank the son who kept showing up, even when we made it difficult." Nobody spoke. There was nothing left to add. Dad simply hugged me, and for the first time since I was a little boy, I felt like I was not carrying the weight of everyone else on my shoulders. I was simply a son standing beside his father. Later that afternoon, Claire, the children, and I spread our blanket beneath the same giant oak tree at Riverside Park where we had shared our picnic 1 year earlier. The ducks still wandered along the pond. Children still laughed across the playground. The summer breeze still carried the smell of fresh grass and charcoal grills. Yet everything felt different because I was different. Lily handed me another handmade card. Inside she had written, in careful block letters, Thank you for always making our family feel safe. Noah climbed into my lap and asked, Dad, what makes someone a really good father? I looked at Claire, who smiled back with the same quiet confidence she had shown me on the hardest day of my life. Then I looked at my children and answered with the truth I had spent years learning. A good father is not the one who tries to make everyone happy. A good father is the one who makes sure the people who depend on him always know they are loved. Noah nodded as though the answer made perfect sense. Maybe it did. Children often understood the important things before adults complicated them. As the sun slowly began to sink beyond the trees, I realized that one painful message had not destroyed my family. It had revealed the cracks we had ignored for years, giving us the chance to rebuild on something stronger than silence. Some relationships ended because the truth finally came out. Ours survived because, for the first time, the truth was finally allowed to stay. And if I learned anything from that unforgettable Father's Day, it was this. The people who truly belong in your life will never ask you to shrink yourself just to make them comfortable. Real family is not measured by shared blood, holiday traditions, or familiar last names. It is measured by the people who choose, day after day, to make sure you never have to wonder whether you are welcome.